Hello, I'm Monster. If you haven't noticed, I'm a huge music geek. From the good and the bad, I'm one of the few people that I know who can find something to like in just about anything music has to offer. Just about. My family, being music geeks themselves, taught me the importance of learning music at an early age. That's me with my first bass. Don't ask about the pose, I was 6. I listened to many different styles and bands growing up, and one of those styles is heavy metal. I freaking love heavy metal. It's fast, aggressive, and loud. It's slow, chill, and peaceful. It's musically complex and dynamic. And what the hell was that? The one thing that I love most about music is experimentation and exploration. Artists stepping out of the normal and creating something unique and original. And heavy metal is one of those genres that's had many years to evolve, spawning many different subgenres to its name. So this is the top 13 heavy metal subgenres. Number 13. Power metal. Throughout the 1970s, what people called heavy metal was fairly new and still trying to find its place among all of the disco, hard rock, prog, and punk bands of the decade. So the 1980s were a very transitional period for heavy metal. While heavy metal's image was being castrated right in front of the public eye, many other bands were experimenting with the sound and forming their own unique styles for the genre. One of those styles is power metal. Formed from the mid to late 80s, this style takes a more melodic, fantasy-based approach to the music and lyrics compared to its darker, more aggressive brothers. Early bands like Halloween, Manowar, Blind Guardian, and many more were taking heavy metal to more epic lengths with the use of keyboards, choirs, and folk-influenced music, blended with the speed and heaviness of traditional heavy metal music. Other bands would later take influence and develop their own styles from power metal, creating new subgenres in the process. Number 12. Neoclassical metal. Out of the many subgenres heavy metal spawned in the 1980s, one aspect of the genre remained the same: the guitar. Heavy metal throughout most of the 1980s remained largely as a guitar-based genre. Many guitarists through the decade were developing different styles and techniques, which helped make the guitar one of the more major aspects of the genre. Yngwie Malmsteen developed one style in particular that was highly influenced by classical music. Other guitars followed, and neoclassical metal was born. During most of the 80s, this genre centered heavily on the guitarists themselves, releasing mostly instrumental albums that focused strongly on the guitar playing. In later years, bands like Symphony X, Time Requiem, Trans-Siberian Orchestra, and many more were taking the neoclassical genre to more technical and epic scales, moving heavy metal into areas of complexity that most people before the 80s would never believe the genre would reach. Number 11. Industrial metal. Industrial metal was nothing new in the 1980s. Artists such as Throbbing Gristle and Cabaret Voltaire were among several developing this form of music from the mid to late 70s. Early industrial music was incredibly experimental for its time. Artists were experimenting with electronic noise, ambience, and just about anything they could find that could help push them further away from anything most people called music. Heavy metal music started to fuse with industrial through the mid to late 80s, with artists like Ministry, Skinny Puppy, and KMFDM, among others, developing the genre. Industrial metal in its early years is very raw, experimental, loud, and heavy, and the genre's popularity grew through the 90s with such acts as Nine Inch Nails, Rammstein, and Pigface, just to name a few. The genre is still going strong today, but there's nothing like the originals. Number 10. Melodic death metal. Developing around Scandinavia and parts of England in the 90s, this style borrowed elements from power metal and death metal. Some groups even added progressive elements to their melodic death. The genre began gaining notoriety through the 90s with groups like Amorphous, Amon Amarth, Dark Tranquillity, and even Carcass did a melodic death album in the 1990s. Melodic death metal is still growing popular today with artists at the Throne of Judgment and the Adult Swim cartoon Metalocalypse. This style of metal is extremely loud, heavy, and epic, and I can't wait to see where it goes in the future. Number 9. Grindcore. Grindcore is a very extreme version of heavy metal, drawing inspiration from death metal, hardcore, and even industrial. The genre was being developed in the underground scenes through the 80s, while groups like Candle Decapitation, Agoraphobic Nosebleed, and Naked City brought the genre more attention during the 90s. Grindcore uses very short and complex song structures, with some albums reaching 100 songs or more. These micro songs, while being extremely loud, aggressive, and insane, also allow for some really interesting and hilarious musical ideas. And the one thing that I love most about this genre is the fact that in the time it takes you to watch this whole episode, you could have listened to an entire Grindcore album. Number 8. Symphonic metal. I love classical. It's one of the earliest forms of written music, and the way I look at it, you have to respect your roots. And symphonic metal not only respects classical music in all its forms and complexities, but in a way, it has also helped keep classical music relevant in a wider audience. Some artists add elements such as black metal, power metal, and folk, while sticking closely to more classical and progressive song structures. The genre is still very young, being developed through the 90s and gaining more popular through the last decade. Many bands like Nightwish, Haggard, Epica, and more are defining this genre with each release and bringing more attention its way. The best way to describe this genre is that it's taking the epic scores from Pirates of the Caribbean and throwing heavy metal in the background. Maybe not like that, but you know what I mean. Number 7. Sludge metal. Sludge metal grew during the late 80s through the 90s, drawing influence from doom metal and hardcore, with slight connections to the development of stoner metal and grunge. What I love about this genre is how they can keep the metal heavy and aggressive while maintaining slower tempos. While early bands in this genre continue to develop the style, newer bands like Mastodon and Baroness have added more progressive rock elements, bringing a little more technicality to the genre. Through the years, bands have started to add stoner metal and southern rock influences as well, showing this genre is just starting to explode. Number 6. Progressive metal. I love progressive rock and heavy metal, and when we put the two together, holy shit do we get some amazing stuff. During the mid-80s, bands such as Dream Theater, Fate's Warning, and Psychotic Waltz were bringing influences from the progressive rock made popular from bands like King Crimson, Yes, and Rush, creating a style of metal that is as complex and heavy as it is melodic and epic. Through the years, more bands have taken progressive metal to more unique areas of their own. Tool, Liquid Tension Experiment, and Planet X are just small examples of where the genre can go. This type of metal is still growing, and I look forward to more fusions with the genre in the future. Number 5. Stoner metal. Developed during the early 90s, stoner metal draws heavy influence from early heavy metal and psychedelic rock bands. In the early half of the 90s, local artists from Southern California helped form the Palm Desert scene of stoner rock, with groups such as Caius, Fu Manchu, and Slow Burn. Their style is a mix of trippy psychedelic jams molded with heavy metal and blues. Around the same time, different groups like Sleep, Bongzilla, Acid King, and Electric Wizard were forming their own styles of stoner metal, adding more psychedelic elements with sludge and long, drony doom metal jams. I like to believe the style began like this.
Hey guys, sorry I'm late. Let's get to it.
We don't have time for that, man.
Yes, we do. Everyone does.
Number 4. Black metal. I love black metal. From early bands like Bathory and Celtic Frost, who laid the groundwork for the genre during the 80s, to Norwegian black metal bands Mayhem, Burzum, and Gorgoroth. Filled with dark, satanic, fantasy-based lyrics, loud, banshee-like shrieks, aggressive guitars, blast beats, and in some later cases, the use of orchestras. The style has a very low production quality, which helps enhance the genre's dark and brooding textures. Black metal artists have influenced many other subgenres of heavy metal, such as symphonic black metal, and Bathory a couple years into their career started adding more Viking and folk themes to their music and lyrics, helping to create the Viking metal genre. Black metal remains mostly underground, but has grown in popularity through the years, spawning many great metal bands as time moves on. Number 3. Drone metal. A subgenre inspired by doom and sludge, drone metal began in the early 90s with such groups as Earth, Sun, O, and Boris. Drone is incredibly slow-moving. Most bands in the genre use atmosphere, deep bassy drones, long build-ups, and ambience to help build upon this style. Through later years, the genre has evolved into newer areas, with bands like Earth stripping down the harshness and developing a more atmospheric and dreamy version of the style on their new albums Angels of Darkness, Demons of Light, Parts 1 and 2. Drone metal is slow, experimental, and relaxing, and yes, sometimes the music stays very minimalist and doesn't seem to go many places, but that's another reason why I like it. You can turn it on in the background while you're chilling out and rocking the ganj without having to pay too much attention. Definitely check these guys out. Number 2. Folk metal. I love folk metal for most of the same reasons that I love power and symphonic metal. It's incredibly heavy, melodic, and epic all at once. Though with folk metal, you get music that is rich with influences from old Celtic and medieval folk music, lyrics about mythology, paganism, and history, and instruments like accordions, flutes, and violins, mixed with your traditional heavy metal instruments. We have early groups like Skyclad, Cruachan, and Amorphous to thank for bringing the folk metal genre to more attention in the 90s. Other bands who followed in their footsteps and expanded the genre through the last decade are groups like Fintroll, Folk Earth, and Teresa's. Folk metal has spawned a few subgenres and fusions as well, like Celtic metal with Cruachan, and more recently, pirate metal with Ailstorm, and I am definitely excited to see where this genre goes next. Number 1. Avant-garde metal. What I love about avant-garde music in general is that you have to be a little avant-garde in order to create some of these subgenres in the first place. It involves heavy experimentation. It involves fusing different genres, and it involves exploring new and artistically odd ways of creating music. Artists like Mike Patton with Phantomus and Mr. Bungle, John Zorn with Naked City, Buckethead, Painkiller, and many more challenge the laws of music creation. Newer groups like Animals as Leaders and I Wrestled a Bear Once are also bringing new audiences to the avant-garde metal genre. Avant-garde music is really hard to define, whereas a lot of the techniques are often used in other genres as well. To me, avant-garde is more like an empty playground where you can go and do whatever you want. Music is constantly evolving and has been since the beginning of time. From the first song sang and the first note played and so on, music has and always will change. Like I've said before, what I love most about music is experimentation and exploration. Heavy metal is just one of the many genres of music that I listen to. I love heavy metal, but I also love genres like prog, blues, funk, jazz, and many more. As you can see, there are so many genres of music, heavy metal included, that I can't just pick one. So that was the top 13 heavy metal subgenres. Feel free to list your favorites, but until then, we'll see you next time.